According to LinkedIn, 38% of entry-level jobs require 3 to 5 years of experience, with nearly 90% of employers refusing to hire recent grads, leaving nearly two-thirds of all entry-level roles filled by those with over 7 years in the workforce. Raising the question, how is anyone actually supposed to get work experience? While the concept of entry-level jobs has taken many forms throughout history, the purpose they serve has existed for as long as work itself. Before modern employment structures, skills were passed down through apprenticeships, a system dating back to ancient Mesopotamia, where young artisans learned their craft under a master craftsman in exchange for discounted labor, a model that would later spread throughout ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome. By medieval Europe, guilds formalized this process, requiring apprentices to live alongside their mentors for at least a decade, unable to marry or earn wages until accepted by the guild, at which point they could begin practicing their trade independently while training apprentices of their own. However, with the rise of the Industrial Revolution, these structured pathways were dismantled in favor of mass production and efficiency, forcing individuals of all ages into repetitive tasks that limited skill development and left industries without the trained workforce needed to sustain a rapidly evolving economy. Where in response, companies began experimenting with company-led training programs to develop a more stable and skilled workforce. Among the first to formalize this approach was Ford and General Electric, which pioneered a rotational training program where new hires would start in lower-level roles, gaining hands-on experience across multiple departments to develop the skills necessary for internal career advancement. But it wasn't until the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938, which mandated the 40-hour workweek, implemented minimum wage protections, and placed strict restrictions on child labor, that companies were forced to fundamentally restructure their workforce pipelines, accelerating a drastic shift towards structured entry-level positions and internal hiring programs. We're fueled by a booming post-war economy and the dominance of American manufacturing. Corporations filled roughly 90% of their vacancies through internal promotions and lateral assignments, leading up to the 1980s. With the combination of economic stagnation, deindustrialization, and the relentless pursuit of globalization, the 1980s fundamentally reshaped corporate hiring practices, particularly in regards to entry-level positions. As 1.4 million manufacturing jobs were lost between 1979 and 1984, and the Department of Education's publication of A Nation at Risk, educational priorities completely shifted from vocational training programs, making a high school diploma less relevant in the job market and replacing it with a college education as the new hiring baseline, reinforcing the growing divide between high-level professional jobs and low-wage service roles. From 1960 to 1970, 36% of new jobs were in professional and managerial positions, but by the 1980s, only 28% of new jobs were in high-level occupations, leaving a majority of emerging opportunities in low-wage service jobs, such as waitstaff and retail, rather than in skilled and managerial roles. And as a result, high school graduates increasingly filled these low-skilled, low-wage positions, facing limited pathways for advancements and contributing to a significant drop in wages, where during this period, wages for young men fell from $12.19 in 1979 to $8.72 in 1995, while wages for young women declined from $9.01 to $7.43. And as college degrees became established as the baseline in hiring standards, the rise of internships allowed entry-level positions to be filled by unpaid or underpaid interns, leading companies to increasingly abandon workforce development as their responsibility, shifting the burden of skill acquisition entirely onto candidates and universities. However, even for recent graduates, the initial signs of degree inflation mirrored issues that still persist today. A 1983 New York Times article highlighted how companies that continued campus recruitment had compounded the oversupply problem by raising their hiring standards. In fields like retail, which had not cut back on college hiring, recruiters found themselves in the enviable position of considering only the top graduates while simultaneously requiring work experience. Don Franklin, director of executive recruitment for Gimbel's Midwest, noted, "A few years ago, we were happy to find students who had done well academically and were enthusiastic about our company. Now, in addition to good grades, most of my colleagues in retailing are hiring graduates who have had work experience, preferably in this field, and who played a leadership role in extracurricular activities. Where in the last few years, more and more graduates, particularly those in liberal arts, tell our recruiters they're willing to be tellers or secretaries if they cannot get into one of our management training programs, said Bob Junius, manager of college relations for Continental Bank. However, we've refused to do that because we suspect they would become frustrated and, as a result, less productive if we couldn't move them into a better job relatively quickly. And we just can't guarantee that, resulting in tens of thousands of young individuals accepting dead-end entry-level roles that limited long-term career mobility, contributing to the collapse of traditional entry-level pathways, an issue that would only worsen during the 2008 global financial crisis. By 2009, the unemployment rate for young adults aged 16 to 24 soared to 19.2%, more than double the national average. And with further deindustrialization wiping out career opportunities, the United States lost 7.1 million manufacturing jobs between 1980 and 2009, or roughly 38% of its manufacturing base, erasing career pathways that had once provided young workers with stable upward mobility. And as businesses adapted to the post-recession economy, entry-level jobs were fundamentally no longer structured for long-term career growth. A 2014 CBS article noted that employers had stopped hiring entry-level workers to train and develop, instead prioritizing candidates who could immediately generate revenue. A director at Deloitte Consulting reinforced this shift. What we need is people who can immediately get in front of clients. They're not going to sit in a back office anymore. Where as a result, companies increasingly turn to underpaid or unpaid internships as a replacement for traditional entry-level positions. In 1992, only 17% of college students had participated in an internship, but by 2008, that number had increased to 83%, with some experts estimating that 1/4 to 1/2 of those internships were unpaid. And by 2010, an NBC report revealed that employers posted 643 unpaid internships on Stanford's job board, more than triple the 174 listed just 2 years earlier. Where a 2015 Harvard Business School study found that 67% of production supervisor roles required a college degree, even though only 16% of employed supervisors actually had one, reinforcing the growing disconnect between job qualifications and real-world requirements. And by the time the United States began to recover from the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, mid-wage occupations accounted for 60% of jobs lost during the recession, but only 27% of the jobs regained post-recovery. Meanwhile, low-wage jobs, which made up just 21% of the recession losses, accounted for 58% of new jobs created, pushing those without a college degree or those unable to secure a job post-graduation into low-skill, low-wage, dead-end roles, further eroding the foundation for traditional career pathways. Where as a result of stagnant economic conditions alongside the 2020 global crisis, only 24% of current vacancies are now filled with internal candidates, a 66% decrease in just the last 50 years, where 66% of U.S. companies outsource at least one department, resulting in approximately 300,000 American jobs being outsourced annually. Meanwhile, the rise of automation and artificial intelligence threatens to displace an additional 45.3 million workers by 2030, completely eliminating entire categories of work that once served as stepping stones for career advancement, and instead replacing them with more dead-end, low-wage jobs. Or based on an analysis of resumes from entry-level workers without a college education, a 2021 report from Burning Glass Technologies found that after 5 years, 48% remained stuck in a cycle of dead-end jobs with little to no career progression, accompanying the 53 million Americans aged 18 to 64 that earn median hourly wages of $10.22 and median annual earnings of $17,950 without a clear path to higher wages. However, even those who pursued a college education, according to Forbes, 89% of HR leaders admitted they actively avoid hiring recent graduates, with 98% stating their companies were struggling to find talent, while simultaneously, companies spend 4 times as much on recruiting as they do internal development, with 2 in 5 executives saying their company doesn't offer a learning budget or training stipend. And similarly to how LinkedIn's algorithm actually punishes employment gaps by promoting profiles that do not have to present listed substantially less than those currently employed. The traditional advice of get a job at a local grocery store or a restaurant to get work experience is actually hurting your chances of getting employed, as it's leading to automatic rejections by the ATS system or suppression by these job search platforms. Because in the recruiter's eyes, it signals class, forcing young workers to be completely dependent upon internships as a prerequisite for employment, where companies such as ServiceNow reported a 50% increase in internship applications this year, while Citadel saw an internship application rise by 65%, ultimately accepting less than 1%, or just 300 of the 69,000 applications it received. Where according to the Business Higher Education Forum, there were an estimated 5.7 million fewer high-quality internships last year than learners who wanted to intern. And of the 3.6 million students who completed an internship, only 2.5 million enjoyed a higher quality experience, meaning they consistently received different elements of a structured skill-based endeavor. And as competition for internships has drastically increased, this has led to the further rise in unpaid internships, where according to the National Association of Colleges and Employers, 47% of internships in 2022 were unpaid. And as a result, paid interns averaged 1.4 job offers post-graduation, while unpaid interns averaged less than 1. And this cannot simply be dismissed as corporate greed. In a 2017 report, Pay Our Interns, a nonprofit group advocating for more paid internships, found that only 26 out of the 435 House offices and 43 out of the 100 Senate offices offered paid internships, with 51% of Republican offices and just 31% of Democratic offices providing any form of compensation. And even with all of these headlines painting of a national labor shortage, instead of any of the powers that be attempting to actually solve this issue, it is just once again sold as a generation in its entirety as too lazy and entitled to just work harder, describing the only solution as more outsourcing and automation. And one of the greatest aspects of this channel is that even through all of the artificially fabricated and curated division that each and every one of us are experiencing, I still get access to individuals that are actively trying to make a change, that are trying to provide solutions to the issues that I've addressed in videos like this. One of the most interesting conversations, one of the greatest conversations I've had in a long time, recently just came from an individual that's a very successful entrepreneur from France that now lives in Singapore. His main objective is to connect the recruiter with the candidate without the ATS, without the AI softwares, to make it more humane. What you would think that the hiring process would be like, right? What his feedback is from all of the individuals that he's spoken with, hiring managers, recruiters, employers, is that any change that is made removes the quantity of candidates, not the quality like we hear about, that the quality of candidates aren't good, that they can't find talent. The reality is they want the quantity. That is why ghost jobs are rising so much. They want to be able to have that database of potential candidates. They want to be able to have the personal information. They want to have all of these different things. But what we hear as a society, and what I suspect that larger companies that have this endless just garbage pile of these different systems that takes all the way to get to the top, is that, well, the generation is just lazy, or too many people are applying. We don't have the software needed to be able to go through all of these candidates. So we need more ATS systems. We need more AI. We need more of all of these different things. Something that makes no sense to me is that in the 1980s, in 2008, going to 2014, and right now, we're having the exact same issues. I was looking at a 1983 article, New York Times article. I was looking at a CBS article from 2008, and I was looking at a Forbes article today. All of them said the same thing. And with that, as it's getting harder for each generation emerging into the workforce, recruiters and hiring managers are only getting bigger. They're effectively becoming worse at their job because it isn't working, right? They need better candidates. The skill sets are low. They're having to fire more people. And the issue is that what we're experiencing now is like a hiring manager, an employer, a recruiter is like a very attractive person on a dating site. And they're going through the apps, looking at all of the desperate candidates or the job seekers. They're going through just an endless amount of people. Eventually gets tired, puts it away, decides to drive home, and you come home to your partner of a skeleton crew, of complete outsourcing, to AI, to automation, to all of these other components. And then what you say to that person is, this young generation, all of these things that consistently isn't getting anywhere. But as a society, we can grip onto those components because there's no way that you haven't met a lazy young person. There's no way that you haven't met someone that can't communicate or that dressed inappropriately or, all of these different things, couldn't show up on time. And so what you do is you believe that. You believe the expert information because you've seen it in your own life. These dang people drinking their lattes. The reality is, it isn't the latte drinking folk that are actually getting hurt here. When you say 90% of hiring managers are not going to hire recent grads because they lack soft skills or that you had to fire some of them, what you're doing is instead of just maybe becoming a better hiring manager, a better recruiter, a better employer, doing a better hiring practice, you're deciding that instead of hurting these little individuals that are not putting the work needed, you're going to instead remove all of the opportunities for everybody else. And that is what this channel consistently is trying to address. Are there lazy people? Of course. Are there certain individuals from certain generations that suck? Absolutely. Are there some hiring managers that are trying to do their job? Of course. But I am more and more getting convinced through the comments that I receive. I wake up every day with, 10 to 15 comments of, I will never hire a Gen Z person again. Why is it my job to have to teach them? Why is it my job to have to do this? Why does no one have blah, 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 blah? And a common response I have to them is, so I guess that your goal is to retire by the time they're 30, 40, 50, and we're facing a complete employment crisis. And I've never gotten a response back. So ultimately what I'm trying to say is that just like every one of my videos, we have to start having these discussions. We have to start talking about the dollar cannot purchase anything. We have to talk about how wages are not keeping up with the price of goods. We have to talk about how this issue has happened continuously for the past 50 years and no change is being made. We have to actually have conversations of why is this generational divide? Why is this conflict so arousing to individuals? Why do you so badly want to argue about who had it worse? It isn't effective. I think there's more of us that actually want to get out of this, that want to be able to afford a house, afford a family, afford what was once the American dream. And the way that we do that is we communicate. Now, lastly, I just want to say that for those that are emerging into the workforce through high school or college, what I would do is I would never do a single job application on a platform ever again. I would not do a single thing digitally. The amount, just for a quick example here, I'm sorry to take so much time, but a quick example is when I left working at the bank, through a personal connection, I started interning at a podcast studio. I worked there for a complete year, unpaid. I didn't make a single dollar during the first year of this channel, about a year and a half actually. Didn't make a single dollar. And through that period of time, I kept getting promised that I was going to be getting these things and, whatever. But I was growing my YouTube channel, right? So by the end, I finally had my first paid gig that quickly got outsourced to a team in Vietnam. So it's quite interesting to see that YouTube channel compared to the growth of actually putting everything I have into something. But during that period of time, I was applying to every single podcast studio in Austin. And what they were looking for was YouTube experience, podcast experience, SEO experience. I had all three. Again, I have a YouTube channel, right? I had podcast experience. I had worked with big name podcasts. I didn't get a word back from a single one of them. I think it was like 48 to 50 different podcast studios. Didn't hear back once. The system does not work. I made one video about LinkedIn, about the importance of personal networking, changed my life. The amount of individuals that have reached out as a result of that I now am able to collaborate with, I went to a men's group, the amount of difference that has made. Honestly, I know it's hard to hear and people need jobs. Stop doing the job platforms. They're not intended to actually give you a job. I think that they are more damaging than they are effective. And I think all that you're doing is you're feeding into this narrative of I need more quantity than quality. An entry-level job, you should be hiring for aptitude, you should be hiring for attitude, not for aptitude. And everything has been flipped on itself. So what is one thing that you can take away from this? What is one change? The biggest change that you can make as an individual is learn how to communicate so that we can begin turning individuals into small groups, into neighborhoods, into communities to actually address these things that we need to effectively fix. So I hope that you enjoyed this. The entry level and blue collar jobs, something I'm very passionate about because that allows the diversity of candidates to be able to have more options, to take away the monopolies that I think college universities have. Anyway, thank you all so much for your time. Until next time, bye-bye.
And just because I got to work a half hour late now and then, I didn't understand why Mr. Canfield should get mad. And then the pay I got. Huh. That wouldn't buy many of those things I wanted. The shoe business was no good.